Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn and today I have a flip video of the Spellbinders July 2023 club kits. Here is a quick look at the 4 cards that I will be making in this video, and as per usual for my flip videos I'll make at least 1 flat, 1 layered, 1 interactive, and 1 pop-up card. The Spellbinders club kits that I'll be showcasing in this series of cards will be the 3D embossing folder, the small die of the month, the large die of the month, and the clear stamp and die of the month. So let's make these. Okay, so getting started with my flat card here, I am going to be crafting with the clear stamp of the month, and with the clear stamp of the month you do have the option of also getting the coordinating die if you want with it, or you can just get the stamp by itself. And in this month's kit, I think pretty much everything that I received anyways is Christmas themed, with the exception of the quick and easy card kit of the month, which I am lucky enough to get to craft with this month. What I am starting with here is a some clear Versamark stamping of the largest stamp in the stamp set, which is this really lovely frame. And it's nice because even though, yes, it can be used for the holidays, it is just more your wintry foliage, so there isn't anything really specifically holiday about it. So I do think it's nice and versatile in that way. And I am going to do a little bit of heat embossing with this crimson embossing powder that I have. Actually, it was still kind of lying around my desk from the heat embossing kind of exploration with the Better Press, and so I thought that it would be a really lovely color for this card as well. And so I'm gonna take my heat gun to it and just melt that embossing powder. If you've never done heat embossing, it's really fun. It's magical every time, really, because essentially what embossing powder is powdered sort of enamel. And when you take a heat gun to it, that melts the enamel and it gives your stamped impression a very glossy, slightly raised look. And with the coordinating die of the month, there is a die that cuts out an inner aperture of this frame. And what I did was I die cut it from the panel that we just heat embossed, but then I transferred the location and die cut it out of the front of my card base. So be sure to open up your card base so that you're only cutting through the front. And what this is going to achieve is that we just get a neat little effect of being able to put something on the inside of our card that's going to be visible through to the front of the card as well. And for my purposes, because I define a flat card not as strictly just your card base, but rather 1 layer of cardstock on top of your card base. And so this panel is going to be that 1 layer. But by cutting through our card base and then getting the opportunity to adhere something directly to the inside of the card, I've kind of given myself an extra layer to play with that is still going to be visible through the front. The whole idea behind doing a flat card is sometimes you do want easy mailers. You want to be able to pop a card in the mail and be assured that it's not going to trigger any extra postage, so long as the size, is within the constraints for a single stamp. And so that's why I like to always try to include flat cards, just in general in my card making, but in particular for my flip series, so that if you are wanting some ideas for easy mailers, that's the purpose that these cards serve. Now, that's not to say that the other cards I make won't go through the mail perfectly okay, but sometimes there is quite a lot of dimension on those, and it may trigger extra postage. Or sometimes you might want to actually put a little bit of extra, like a little extra piece of cardstock or padding, or just to protect it a little and make sure that it doesn't get damaged in the mail process. So with the little piece that die cut out from the center there, I inked it up in a coordinating color of ink that comes actually pretty close to the embossing powder, even though it's from a completely different brand. And I just inked up that panel, and instead of trying to find a solid color cardstock, especially since we did already cut it out, so the instead of wasting that little bit of white cardstock, I just inked it up. So it's a nice kind of efficient use of everything. And I just placed that right through the aperture of the front of my card, just to make sure that it lines up nicely in when the card is closed. And so now I can actually take my sentiment and cut it out with its coordinating die. And I'm actually going to pop this up on a little bit of foam. Normally, I don't use any foam on my flat cards because the whole idea is to keep them as non-dimensional as possible. But because I did give myself that extra layer to play with because we cut through the card base, I figure this may be cheating a little bit, but it's still a very relatively flat card, but you still have that really nice dimension, and with low profile foam, it's not super thick. So I think that still qualifies as an easy mailer. Okay, so now moving on to my layered card, I am crafting with the large die of the month, which has there's a lot of good stuff here, and you're only looking at half of it, maybe 2/3 of it, because on the back of my storage sheet, I do have additional dies that do come in this set, and it's pretty phenomenal because this set it has such a broad range from cute, like the gingerbread man, the stocking, and the gnome, sort of the holiday gnome. But then there's also some really classic imagery, like your holly leaves and berries and winter foliage. And you even get a couple of ornaments. And so there's quite a lot going in here, and you get quite a bit of variety. So lots and lots to play with. Today I'm going to be assembling a boatload of gingerbread men because I'm going to make a slimline card, and I thought it would be really fun to just make a bunch of them and have them fill up the slimline. I pre-made some Nuvo drops instead of drawing them directly. Now, the die set does have dies for the eyes. I'm opting to use my Nuvo drops instead. And similarly, the die set does have dies for the little buttons on the gingerbread man. But again, I just decided to use my Nuvo drops. Now, they didn't dry 100%. You can see it left a little bit of red there. So I'm going to set that aside, let it continue to dry as I work on the rest of my card. And so I've got this panel here, which I embossed, not with the embossing folder that I got, the 3D embossing folder, but rather this is an older embossing folder that was specifically designed to be slimline. And I'm glad that they are moving towards the larger embossing folders as a rule now, because I just feel like it's a lot more versatile because it can cover a variety of different card sizes. But the actual folder that I used has some nice stripes, and I thought that would fit perfectly. I wasn't looking for a very busy background. I just wanted a little bit of extra texture. And then I've pulled out the alphabet die set from the Be Bold collection, and I have the alphabet in both lowercase and uppercase. And so I die cut the letters for the word joy 3 times for each letter, and I'm gonna glue those together and stack them. And this is a really nice way of getting some extra dimension without needing to add foam, because you could die cut foam if you wanted to get your dimension that way, but if you didn't have foam or something like a 3D glue gel, which I use pretty often, you could just do what I'm doing here, which is to stack the same letter or the same die cut multiple times and build up your dimension that way. And so with pretty much everything assembled, I'm going to do a little bit of dry fitting just to see how I want to arrange this. And I did go ahead and sort of fast forward putting the little buttons on my gingerbread man, and I smeared a little bit because I actually went ahead and applied the Nuvo drops directly on my gingerbread man just so that I didn't have to wait. But if you're gonna do that, you do want to be a little bit careful with handling things so that you don't smear or smudge your Nuvo drops before they fully dry. And one of the reasons why I do like to do them individually on a liner sheet is that if there are any imperfect drops that I make, I just don't, I don't have to actually use it. Whereas if it's on your project, it's on your project. And there's only so much you can do to really save the shape of a Nuvo drop if it doesn't look as nice as you'd like. So that's why I do generally prefer to make them in advance. But if you're going to make them in advance, you do have to give it a good amount of time to dry. Maybe, 24 hours if you want to be really safe. But maybe at the very minimum, like 3 hours or so, maybe even longer, depends. And so that's one of the downsides of trying to pre-make them. But here's a look at this this card full of gingerbread men. Now, moving on to my interactive card. This actually might be my favorite card. It was the first idea I had when I saw all of the club kits. And again, I'm crafting with the large die of the month. There's just so much going on here. There's so much goodness. And the stocking is super cute. You've got a lot of little layers that you can add to give some extra detail to your stocking. And what I love is at the toe and on the heel of the stocking, you even have the stitch lines, which are still visible even after you add the little accent patches that I've added there. Then we have our gnome, and you'll notice that it's not the full body. You don't have the feet of the gnome. But this gnome, he does look like the same size and scale of previous gnomes that we've gotten in the past. So I'm gonna be curious. I'm gonna check some of the holiday gnomes from last year and see, because I think we could probably mix and match him a little bit. And now I believe the design of this originally, as it was designed, was that the arms are downward, as if he's kind of hanging on the edge of something, peeking up over the edge of something. But as you saw at the very beginning of my video, this is going to be a slider. So the mechanism is something like a double slider, where you could potentially have 2 things on a track and they move towards each other. but I'm only going to have the gnome on my slider track, and it's basically going to be a reverse slider. So the direction I'm pulling is going to be opposite from the direction that the gnome is traveling. And to achieve that, I need to create this I-beam mechanism. That's what I refer to it as. And essentially what that is you want to have a middle section that is where your what I call the conveyor belt is going to travel. And then you need, flanking that middle section, you need 2 long rails. So it looks a little bit like this. So maybe it's the shape of an I-beam, a bobbin, that sort of idea where there's that middle section that your conveyor belt can travel. And speaking of the conveyor belt, I like to use a soft plastic. So not the sort of plastic where when you like crumple it up, it makes like a super crinkly noise, but one that's more it's less stiff. And I find those work a little bit better because they'll just move a little bit more smoothly. And it's just a bit of packaging. This was actually just one of those sort of baggies that I think maybe a die set came in. And all I've done is just trimmed it so that it will loop around that middle section of our I-beam. And I just put a little bit of strong tape, red liner tape in this case, and this is one of the things that I don't love about red line tape is that it's so hard to get it off. I actually had to turn my camera off just so that I can get this really close to my eyes in order to get that red liner off. But when you go to close your conveyor belt here, you don't want a super tight fit because you want the plastic to be able to slide and move around that middle section smoothly. If it's too tight, that might actually inhibit the movement. So give yourself just a smidge of wiggle room. You don't want it to be too loose either because then things are going to feel a little bit wobbly. So there's really just a 1/16 of an inch, maybe even less than that, in terms of the amount of slack. Then and I cut that piece out of 120-pound cover weight cardstock because I want that to be really strong. Same with this here. I've cut 2 1-inch strips of 120-pound cover weight cardstock, and this will be my pull tab. And the reason why I've doubled up on what's already pretty strong or thick cardstock is because I do want it to be nice and strong. As we pull on this, I don't want it to feel flimsy when you pull on it. And so by just doubling up on the cardstock, it adds some strength. I did a little bit of dry fitting just now just to make sure that what we want to achieve is, this was just a bit of scrap that I was working with and it just so happened to be the right size. But just to talk through generalities, because you can make this mechanism to fit any die cut. The idea is that the mechanism, our I-beam there, we want that to be completely covered by the die cut. So in my case, the stocking. So I want that piece to be completely hidden behind the stocking. But when I go to attach the pull tab to the mechanism, I want to make sure that there's enough of the pull tab that will be visible below the stocking so that the card recipient can actually grab hold of it and pull it. Now, I made sure when I went to attach the pull tab that I slid the pull tab, or I slid the conveyor belt all the way to one end. And that way, I can make sure that the pull tab is starting in the correct sort of default position. Now on the back here, I just want to put some thin strips of foam. I like to buy my foam as foam sheets. That way I can cut it down to as wide or as narrow as I need. And I am going to attach that to those two rails. So those rails, that's the reason why we needed those rails, because we need some way to glue this down to our card base. And the rails also help to keep the pull tab sliding straight. Otherwise, it can go a little bit wonky. So they help with that as well. Now, my pull tab is attached to the back of the conveyor belt, and my gnome will be attached to the front of the conveyor belt. You can just, this part is a little bit of trial and error. So you can sort of do what I'm doing here, where I am trying to attach my gnome temporarily to the conveyor belt, just to see where I need to position him so that when we pull the tab down, he's going to be visible. And what I realize is that I can't attach the gnome directly to the conveyor belt, because when it gets to the top, he's not high enough. He doesn't come up enough out of the stocking. So then I found a piece of nice heavyweight thick acetate. This is, again, just some packaging, so you don't have to go out and buy anything special. You can just get some hard plastic from a bit of packaging and cut that down to maybe, half an inch or 5/8 maybe. And by having this bit of acetate, I can actually glue the bottom of the acetate to the bottom of my conveyor belt. And this allows the gnome to get attached to the acetate instead of to the conveyor belt. And that will let him travel further, because the conveyor belt there's only so much the conveyor belt can travel. It's restricted by the size of that loop there. And so if I attached my gnome midway, the adhesive will prevent him from going any further. And so that's why the gnome can't be attached to the conveyor belt, because he needs to actually go further. And the mechanism will allow him to go further, but not if he is attached to the conveyor belt. He needs to be attached to that bit of acetate. And the acetate's completely hidden, so you would never know that he's how this is actually constructed unless you saw me do it. So it's a nice bit of trickery. So it's really, really fun to just kind of puzzle my way through these cards sometimes, because when I think about what I want to do for my flip videos, often I just have a loose concept, like, oh, that stocking looks really cute and it looks like the gnome would fit inside of it. So let's see if we can make him pop up. And so it's only when I sit down and start to make the card that maybe I have to do a little bit of troubleshooting. And of course, I always leave the sentiment to last. If I had to do it over again, I would have attached the word joy while the stocking didn't have anything on the back of it, because that would help you to be able to burnish it while it's nice and flat. And just to secure the stocking a little bit more, there is a bit where the toe of the stocking is, and there's some room there to add some extra adhesive. So I'm doubling up on my foam here, because our mechanism has foam both on the front and the back. So to get this nice and level with the rest, I need to double up on the foam. And now with our mechanism complete, I can now attach this to the front of the card. And I just want to position this so that it's nice and centered, but you still have access to easily grab the pull tab. And look how adorable this is. This turned out really well, and I enjoyed doing that bit of troubleshooting because it kind of perplexed me a little bit why the gnome kept on just popping off of the conveyor belt, and that was purely because he was just attached too high, and that bit of acetate really saved the day. Okay, so now on to my last card. Now, I have run this 4¼ by 5½ panel of cardstock through the 3D embossing folder, which is very, very dimensional and has some of these really, really lovely ornaments. And what I thought I would do is just do a little bit of spot coloring with my ink. So I didn't want to ink the whole embossing folder and do that sort of faux letterpress technique. Instead, I just want to make the ornaments gold. And so I'm using a small stencil brush just so that I can really be precise about where I am applying this gold ink. And this is a really lovely Delicata kind of a metallic ink, which is really nice. It's got a very nice shimmer to it. And so I'm just trying to get a really, it doesn't have to be perfect, but I am trying to kind of stay within there aren't really lines as such, but within the shape of the ornament. And that just gives it this really nice shine. And then I thought it looks a little bit sparse, so I wanted to add some additional spots of gold. And there are some, looking at the design, there are some areas that are raised that kind of look like some gold splatter almost. They're very irregular shapes, and so I thought I would just put a touch of gold on those as well. And I also wanted to swipe out some of this gold ink to die cut from, because there's this really nice fishtail banner that comes in the die of the month. And so I wanted to use that as well. And since I was going for something a little bit kind of loose, I did just go ahead and spatter even more gold. and then I used my paintbrush to actually get some of those gold spots that are raised from the embossing folder to be a little bit more prominent. And so that's another thing that I didn't think to do originally, was to just paint with my gold ink. So that would have been another option for getting color onto the ornaments, and in a more precise way. So if you, I think if I were to do it again, instead of using the stencil brush, I would just use a paintbrush and water down the ink a little bit. And so I've gone ahead and die cut that banner from the small die of the month, which also has that debossing plate with the sentiment joy. And now to actually create the pop-up portion of this pop-up card. So this is a really fun sort of abstract, I guess, Christmas tree where you've got this triangular shape, which I still want to figure out how to do a pizza from this, because I still see a pizza wedge every time I look at it. But the idea is that you can configure these floral sprays in such a way that they will all fit together and form this triangle. I was trying to see if there's multiple different ways that you can sort of move these pieces around and still have them fit. And I think it is possible, though there is the prescribed way of making it fit. And it's all on that single die. So if you ever want to know how do I fit all of this together again, just look on the die plate itself, because it's really nice that they did it that way, because then we always have that reference to go back to figure out how does this go back together again once all of these pieces have been separated. And it is nice that just running that one plate through gets you all of the pieces for the base. And this is a layering die set, so we have on that triangular wedge piece, as I mentioned, we'll cut out what I've cut in the lighter green. And that gives you a bit of a platform to start attaching everything else on top of. And so I chose green because there aren't individual dies to layer on top of the leafy portion. And so I wanted to, even though the concept of this Christmas tree is a little bit abstract, I did want to stick to more natural tones for the floral. With the flower, I did ink ahead of time, just a touch, just a little bit of green in the center, kind of like your white poinsettias might have just that little bit of green. And these are meant to be, you could attach the leaves completely flat if you wanted, but what I did was, so there are 2 die cuts with 3 leaves each that are staggered. I took one die cut and adhered that down completely flat, just with my liquid adhesive. And then the other set of 3 leaves, I put a little bit of 3D glue gel, and in the center, I pushed that down completely flat, but on the leaves, I had a little bit of that glue gel underneath. And that gives those set of leaves just a little bit of dimension behind them. So it's just something that is just a little extra touch to add a little bit of depth to these, and without having to do a lot of 3D flower forming. Now, I'm going to assemble 2 of these because this is going to be the pop-up mechanism in the center of my card when you open it up. And I don't know that you would necessarily always look at, both sides, especially if this is on, put on display, but it is nice to make sure that both sides of the tree are decorated, which I kind of feel that way in real life too, is even though our Christmas tree often the back of it is facing a wall and no one can really walk around there to see it, I still like to decorate it a little bit and not have it be completely bare. So I guess that concept kind of translates to my card as well, just to make sure that from all angles it's nice and decorated. So with my pop-up cards, I do like to attach the front panels first, because once you start putting things into the center of the card, it does get harder to burnish as you're applying things to the front. And so the other thing I like to do with pop-up cards is I do like to keep the front of the card just a little bit understated, so that when you open it up, that's where all the fun is, and as well that is what you're going to be looking at most of the time, especially if it does get put on display. So I figure the front doesn't need to have a lot going on there. Okay, so what I've done is just from some scrap pieces of that very same, it's the darker green cardstock that I used to cut the triangle or the base of the tree. I've just got 2 lengths here that are rather arbitrary to start, but what I'm doing is I'm trimming this down. I folded this piece in half, and I trim this down so that my tree, when the card is closed, will still fit completely within the card, and that shorter segment I measured so that it's coming up right to the score line but doesn't go past it. And I just tried to kind of maximize how far out I can fit my tree so that it still will close and nothing is going to be popping out. And both of those little segments, the little strips that I'm using to attach my tree to the inside of the card, they need to basically be the same because the tree segment is the same. So you want to be able to fit both halves of the tree inside the card when it's folded. And so that's just in terms of general mechanism. I know I'm not giving actual measurements because I didn't measure it. This is sort of conceptually, you could do this with anything really. And so if you know conceptually that what you're aiming for is to ensure that whatever you want to pop up stays completely within the boundaries of the card base. And then you can measure that little pop-up mechanism to fit in order to have it be kind of a little bit ways from the center of the card and still be able to close down flat. So once you've got your two pieces, the last thing that needs to happen is the two halves of the tree need to get glued together. And that way, when you open it up, they both come up together. And so that's why I keep on closing this flat to make sure that it actually will close. And I used a little bit of 3D glue gel, just thinking that I would need some dimension on the star that's on top of the tree, but I didn't really need the glue gel. It was better to just use PVA glue, and I just put a little sewing clip on there just to keep those attached while it's drying. Because the thing I realized I forgot was to add the little Nuvo drops where the little berries would be on the foliage here. And so I went ahead and I did pre-make them all. I just forgot to attach them while this whole thing was flat. But that actually worked out well that they were pre-made because they'll go on just fine. And I even forgot some on the other side too. So it's nice to have these kind of pre-made and ready to go. So I've dotted all of those on. I'll definitely make sure that they have a little bit of time to dry before I close this card. But there you can see how it pops up and you get some nice dimension. The front and the back are decorated, and of course it still folds flat. So here's a final recap of all of the cards that I made in this video. I've got my flat card here, which has a little bit of a peekaboo kind of effect in the sense that we've cut through the front of the card completely. So that Merry Christmas is actually the inside of the card. And then my layered card features the large die of the month, these fun little gingerbread men, and it's just really, the detail is amazing. There are die cuts for everything, but I did use my Nuvo drops for the eyes and for the little buttons. Here's my interactive card. It's a reverse pull tab, so I'm going to pull down and the gnome is going to pop up out from behind the stocking. And I just think that is just really, really adorable and a nice little surprise just to see him popping up. And everything moves really smoothly. So really, really love that. I think that's going to be my favorite card. And here is my final card, my pop-up card, which features the 3D embossing folder. And I think that looks kind of nice on its own, but it's kind of even better to open it up and have this pop up on the inside. So there is the small die of the month, which has some of these really lovely florals and this kind of a fun, different, abstract Christmas tree design. So really, really fun club kits already starting in with my Christmas in July crafting. So it's really nice to get a head start on holiday crafting. So if you are ready to start on your holiday crafting, I hope you'll check out these club kits. If there's more than one club kit that you think you might like, definitely look at those, the value club kits where there's different configurations of several of them bundled together. I did also get the Glimmer of the Month, which I haven't crafted with in this video, so that will be in a separate video. And as well, I got the Quick and Easy Card Kit of the Month, so you can look forward to that video coming later this month too. And when those videos are ready, they will be in my Spellbinders playlist if you want to check that out. Thanks so much for joining me on this one, and until next time, happy crafting and have a fabulous day. Bye!